Hello, welcome, and salutations to Den of Otaku, Den of Geek's official anime discussion series, where we break down all things anime, Japanese pop culture, and just basically all the biggest developments going on in the industry. I am your host, Daniel Kurland, and in this very special episode, we are plugging ourselves into Skynet. We are talking evil androids, science fiction, cyberpunk dystopias, and basically just celebrating Netflix's new anime, Terminator Zero. We're going to talk about Terminator's impact as a franchise. We're going to talk about Production IG's legacy as an animation studio, and just kind of showcase why Terminator Zero is succeeding where other Terminator projects have failed. Plus, we also have an interview with Mattson Tomlin, who's the showrunner and head writer for Terminator Zero, where you really get to dig deep into the circuits of the series and just explain what's going on in the show and why it's such a big deal. So let's go for it, guys. Come with me if you want to learn. That's a Terminator reference.
Malcolm, what are you scared of?
Judgment.
Okay, so Terminator, why do people care about Terminator? So why is it such a big deal? And I think what is interesting about this series is it really digs deep into artificial intelligence, which has become such a growing concern in the world. Now, it's interesting that when James Cameron and Galen Hurd first made Terminator, I mean, artificial intelligence was going on, but it's like the idea of a robot, self-aware apocalypse was very much science fiction make-believe at that point. And now we're living in a time where like artificial intelligence is taking people's jobs, it's changing entire industries. It's a very real danger. Like there are things like deep fakes going on. There's a lot to worry about. And it's kind of fascinating that we're not at a point of a robot apocalypse necessarily, but I mean, we're not there either. It's been like more real than it ever has been. And Terminator is a franchise that's really had its finger on that pulse for a long time. It's a franchise that we haven't really been able to let go of. There's always more Terminator content coming. And I mean, as someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, I remember the first time I saw Terminator and just being blown away at it. Like at the effects, the ideas, just the sheer audacity of it. Like Terminator 2, I still think is like one of the best action films ever made. It's one of the best sequels ever made, I think. And it's kind of fascinating that the original is really like this stripped down, grungy horror film. Like it's kind of a slasher movie when you think about it. It's just like this unstoppable android trying to kill people. That's a very frightening idea. And Terminator, those first two films are such groundbreaking science fiction. And there's more films in the franchise that haven't always connected. I mean, I personally am a big fan of Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on in there. In each of the movies, there's kind of something that people have at least been able to latch onto and celebrate. But the subsequent films, they don't have the right RAM. You know, they haven't really worked. There's been Terminator video games, comic books, even novels, and even those are like cycling through the same ideas and iconography, but there's still something missing there. It's not giving people what they wanted out of those original two Terminator movies. And what's really kind of cool is that Production IG, this animation studio, has come along and they've neuralinked themselves together with Skydance Television and Netflix Animation and made Terminator Zero. And this new anime, it's really successful not just as a Terminator anime series, but it's finally got the formula right. It's the best Terminator media we've had in like over a decade as far as I'm concerned, and it's done this really impressive work of appealing to diehard fans and being faithful to the source material, but also helping push it in a new direction as well. Like you can enjoy this show if you've never seen any Terminator before and you're maybe just an anime fan, as we are here at Den of Otaku, but it does this great job of bridging that gap and being familiar but also very new. Now, I mentioned Production IG, and they're a big deal in terms of why this show is working. And to just give a little history on Production IG. They're one of the biggest animation studios in the anime industry. They've been around for over 35 years. They've done over 100 different productions, and they're kind of synonymous with like cyberpunk, science fiction, dystopias. I mean, they did Ghost in the Shell and Psycho Pass, which are like two of the top tier programs in that genre. Their first production was called Zillion, which is about like a warrior race of robots who are trying to kill humans in the future, which is obviously very much in line with Terminator. And they're just such a cutting edge studio that if you're looking for anime that has like darker themes, mature storytelling, and just like really edgy science fiction, Production IG is the place that you go to. And what's really cool is that Production IG isn't just working on Terminator Zero, but they've assembled a lot of the talent from Ghost in the Shell, from Psycho Pass, and brought them onto this. The mecha design team in Terminator Zero has people from Ghost in the Shell and Psycho Pass, which is just really cool. And the director of Terminator Zero, Masashi Kudo, he directs all 8 episodes of the show. He didn't just rewatch all the Terminator movies, but he rewatched all of James Cameron's filmography. And this kind of attention to detail, he's built a Terminator anime that has the same visual language as James Cameron's films. It really fits together with it, and it does this extra work that a lot of other Terminator things haven't done. They think that if they just have John Connor or Arnold Schwarzenegger in the mix, that's enough. But Terminator Zero really goes that extra mile. They really want to feel like Terminator. They really want to live and breathe in that world. And Terminator Zero really does a great job just nailing that dynamic with the crew that they've assembled. And I mean, Production IG could have done a Terminator anime in like the first decade of their career, but the fact that they're doing it now, almost 4 decades into the business, it really feels like the culmination of everything they've done, that they've spent all these years dealing with dark themes, edgy science fiction, and it's almost like they've been training to make the perfect Terminator series, just like Kyle Reese has been training with the Resistance to take down Terminators. It's really kind of like a poetic culmination to everything they've done. This isn't their final series, but like it's really kind of beautiful, I think, when an animation studio can take everything they've done in the past, synthesize that together, and build something better. And in the case of Production IG, Terminator Zero is really the perfect use of what they do as an animation studio and why they've become so popular in the first place. Now, another reason that Terminator Zero has, I think, really nailed the formula and succeeded where other Terminator media has failed is that it's not just a Terminator anime, it's telling a uniquely Japanese story that's set in the Terminator universe. And what I mean by that is sometimes you get an animated version of an established IP and it's cool, it's fun, but you're like, why is this anime? Why are we doing an animated version of this? And Terminator Zero has really worked hard to justify why it's using this medium to tell its story. And I think it's very interesting that Terminator is a very American property. All the films are set in America. It's very much entrenched in American ideologies. But what's interesting is like Judgment Day, the apocalypse that it's building to, doesn't just happen in America. It happens in the entire world. So why not tell a Terminator story that's set in Japan? And that's exactly what Terminator Zero does. It's set in 1990s Japan. It tells a story about a scientist named Malcolm Lee, who is developing a new artificial intelligence system that can potentially compete with Skynet. So Skynet sends a Terminator back in time to kill Malcolm and his 3 children. The Resistance also sends someone back in time to protect them. And at face value, that doesn't sound particularly innovative. It's kind of everything that the past Terminator films have been doing. What Terminator Zero is doing that is really kind of different is that it leans into the 1995 Tokyo subway sarin gas attacks. It deals with Tokyo's earthquakes. It deals with Tokyo's relationship with nuclear weapons and builds all of that into the show. These are all very interesting ideas and themes that aren't present in a typical Terminator movie. And I think this is just such a good approach when you're doing any sort of remake or extension to a franchise. A lot of the times, the things that people are worrying about is that this new version of something is going to replace the old thing, that it's going to replace the old thing, especially in a franchise like Terminator, where you're literally resetting timelines and erasing things. Terminator Zero doesn't encroach on anything in the past, and in fact, all of the Terminator movies are canon to this series. What it does is it chisels out a new space where it can coexist with them all. and expands on that franchise by telling a new story just in a different part of the world. Like, there's an anime called Parasite that's about an alien invasion, and Netflix recently did a live-action version of Parasite called Parasite the Grey that doesn't just do a live-action version of Parasite, but tells that story in South Korea rather than Japan. And that's the kind of thing we need to be doing with any new return to an IP. Let's not just remake it, but tell a new story elsewhere in the world that can coexist, can build upon those themes, and branch out and maybe connect back to the original. It's really, really cool. Like 1990s Japan, for instance, too, they have a very different relationship with firearms. Like, the original Terminator has the Terminator with a machine gun and stuff, and just those type of weapons weren't readily available in Japan. So in this show, you get a Terminator that's dealing with a crossbow and really like more lo-fi technology. Someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to stick out like a sore thumb in Japan, so you have a different Terminator that kind of looks like someone out of Perfect Blue. Like, he's really unnerving in like a very different way than Schwarzenegger ever was. And you get these ideas that riff on the original, but are still doing something very different with it. And I think that's the key. I think that's why Terminator Zero works where other Terminator projects haven't. I mean, in addition to all of that, this is just a gorgeous show. Production IG goes above and beyond with the visuals. The action sequences are incredible. The score is really like a secret weapon on this show. They've assembled like a top tier vocal cast. You have people like Timothy Olyphant, Rosario Dawson, Andre Holland too. All of these are people that really pour their souls into this production, even though you're just getting their voices, and they're people that really fit with the Terminator brand. They feel like great people that should be working in this universe. And in addition to that, you have one person who's telling a unified story. The showrunner and head writer for Terminator Zero, Mattson Tomlin, he wrote all 8 episodes, and he's someone who really isn't just passionate about Terminator, but his filmography has done a lot with AI horror stories. He did a film called Mother Android that is very much in line with Terminator. He wrote a draft of the upcoming Mega Man movie that, again, is like a futuristic robot story that's very different than Terminator, but is still kind of dealing with similar themes. And he's someone who just understands this world so well. And we got the really exciting opportunity to talk to Mattson Tomlin about why he was interested in doing a Terminator anime, what the franchise means to him, what he hopes Terminator Zero will do for the future of Terminator, and it's just a really exciting conversation. So let's give that a look. This is Daniel Curlin with Den of Otaku, Den of Geek's official anime discussion series. We have a very special guest here today, Matson Tomlin, the showrunner and writer of Terminator Zero. Thank you for being here, Matson.
Thanks for having me.
Terminator is such like an iconic property, but to start things off, like, what is your relationship with the show? When did you first see Terminator? What's exciting about it to you?
I grew up in a really, really small town, and the local library had VHS tapes that you could rent. Rented Terminator when I was 8 or 9, and only got as far as Arnold in the bathroom sticking a screwdriver in his eye and popping out half of his face, and was just too terrified to keep watching. So then it went away, went back to the library, and just kind of haunted me for years and years. Then in my early teens, maybe 12, 13, went and found it again and just thought, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And then discovered T2, and then the third one was coming out, and just kind of went on from there. So have always loved and been kind of terrified by the series. In the fall of 2020, I was directing a movie called Mother Android, which was also a apocalyptic killer robot movie. And I got a call from my reps who said, hey, kind of a funny one, but Skydance and Netflix are teaming up with a animation company in Japan, Production IG, and they want to do a Terminator anime. Is that something that's interesting to you? And I said, it's 1,000% interesting to me. And so I had a few kind of preliminary conversations in the fall of 2020. It was really clear right away that the whole thing was wide open, that there weren't any mandates, there wasn't, it needs to be this or needs to be that. They were just kind of like, look, we think that putting, Terminator in the world of anime, like, that's interesting, and it's something that hasn't been done before. And, we have all of the movies, but we want to try something else. So it was kind of a blank canvas for me. And the one request that they had was have some kind of Japanese element in it, since we are partnering with an animation company that is in Japan. The director is Japanese. Like, let's have something that, and at first they were saying maybe just a character that's Japanese. And I just kind of went, no, we should just go there. Like there narratively, there seemed to be this incredible opportunity because all of the movies take place on the U.S.-Mexico border. It's all Los Angeles. It's all Texas. So to suddenly go, wait, what's going on in the rest of the world? What's going on in Tokyo? That just felt narratively like a very fresh place to go, where suddenly a lot of new things could happen that we haven't seen before.
One of the things I love the most about the show is just how Japanese it does feel, and even just to be setting it in the 90s where like guns weren't necessarily prevalent in Japan, so you have this Terminator that has like a crossbow kind of thing is so cool. I really love how you worked in like the Shinrikyo subway sarin gas attacks as like a plot point to it. All that really makes sense, and you can really kind of feel the culture of it in the show. It really makes a difference.
There was also, I kind of the intense way to start the conversation, but there was also, it is a story that is in a big way about nukes and about nuclear proliferation. And so having the show set in Japan, where there's very obviously like some very, very real, like not funny history about that, it just kind of caused me to go, okay, this really has to say something, and it has to say something in a way that is respectful and honest, and also remembers that like there's a past here and there's also potential futures. And so it felt like the right thing, but also the kind of thing that it required a level of thought and articulation to be able to do it the right way.
It seems like one of the themes you're exploring in the show is that almost maybe it isn't the worst thing if mankind gets wiped out, that like humans are so driven on war and destruction, and that maybe like humans are just as bad as an AI Terminator at the end of the day. Is that something you kind of specifically wanted to build upon and explore?
I think it's something that has to be asked, I think that like I'm not somebody that is like this jaded person who's like, oh, we'd be better off, the world would be better off without people. It's like, on the one hand, yeah, of course it would. Of course, the planet would heal, like the animals would be able to like be in their rightful habitat, like all of that stuff. Yes, of course. And so if that's a yes, of course, then you have to ask, so what are we doing? And what is the point? And we've ravaged the environment. We're at war with ourselves. Like we do all of this like terrible, fucked up shit. So then where's the good? What is the good? And is that good worth fighting for? It's like what is humanity's place, and why are we worth fighting for? And I think that those are really tough questions to answer, but I think that they're also kind of the questions that we have to answer always, and we have to be asking ourselves those questions. And so to be able to do it in this format where you take one of the holy franchises that takes on kind of human beings trying to survive against technology and, being the creators of their own self-destruction, and then kind of go, who cares? Like, what's the fucking point of us? Like, to me, to just like really lean into that was very exciting.
Production IG is just so incredible. To have the people behind Ghost in the Shell and Psychopaths working on this show. It feels like they have like such a knack for dystopian futures and stuff. That must have been so exciting to have them involved with the production.
It's kind of when I've been really, really spoiled with some of my collaborators because I'm over here. I'm just me. I am doing the best I can, and over and over and over, I get paired with people, in the comic space, the comics that I've done with Lee Bermejo and Andrea Sorrentino, and then similar in here with Production IG and with director Kudo, getting placed next to these amazing, amazing artists. Like Kudo is a genius, and the fact that he can take whatever thing I've written and then turn it into this propulsive action that really works, and the emotion works, and the atmosphere works. It was such a joy to not have to worry about how these episodes were going to come out, and to instead just be able to write to my heart's content, have some great conversations, check in, and just be like, what are you guys doing? And just have my mind blown every step of the way.
The films have done a good job of showing different Terminators, and I think this show stands out because if you had like a Schwarzenegger-looking Terminator in Japan, that would kind of feel inauthentic. Was it an interesting challenge to kind of create a new Terminator that is distinct from the films, but also just other anime cyborgs in general?
Yeah, man. It's one of those things where I think because of the way that the film franchise went, you kind of get into this place of, oh, all Terminators look like Arnold. And that's kind of, I think, the first gut reaction. And then you go, oh, no, there's always other Terminators that look like other people. So you start there and kind of go, okay, so there's wiggle room here. It's like once it was clear, okay, it's not going to be an Arnold Terminator. What's it going to be? And then I just found myself going, okay, what is the point of a Terminator? And what is the point of a Terminator in this story? And they were created as infiltration units. So it's like, okay, having a guy that looks like he weighs 280 and is 6'7", well, it's like, you're going to notice that guy. Mm-hmm. And so still wanting to pay homage to a little bit of the stature and just kind of looking like, okay, like you're going up against a formidable foe. It's like you can't just push this thing over. But also somebody who can kind of blend in. And again, the show takes place in the 90s, and so there was something that was kind of fun about going, okay, 90s Japan, like what could we do here that is just kind of unexpected? And for me, going back to the first film and going back to the first film's horror roots and going, I think this is kind of a serial killer show. Like there's of course there's action in the show, but I was more interested in taking the jag of he's like Jason Voorhees. And so to make him feel scary. And so when we were going through the design process, there were lots of drawings sent my way. And we landed on our guy in part because he was weirdly a little cross-eyed and he looked a little slimy. Mm-hmm. I started calling him our creepy fish man. And it just kind of felt to me like that's not the guy you want to run into a dark alley and see that. Yeah. It was all about kind of leaning into who could blend in, but also when you think about him, go, no, that was creepy. I want to get away from that guy.
Off of that too, I think you do a really good job of you feature some fun Terminator iconography, like the skull crush and like the time travel pose, and even just like "Come with me if you want to live." Was it fun to kind of reference those things, but also a challenge to not go too far there, or to just make it kind of feel like empty fan service? What was like the line that
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that we've all seen in any movie where there are sequels and then callbacks start to happen. There's a version that really kind of makes you go, fuck yeah. And then there's a version that makes you go, I hate this and I'm leaving. Yeah. And I think that line is tricky depending on the context. So I think that any time that there's a callback that is like a real like callback, got to make sure you earn it. Got to make sure that it feels fun and doesn't make you suddenly go, I wish I was watching Terminator 2 instead. That is truly the danger, is just now I'm thinking about this other thing. But there are other callbacks, in the first episode, you have this sequence where Misaki is in a toy store and she is going and looking for the Kaneko, the cat, and these two little boys run past her with guns and they're going, "You're dead, you're dead," and that's right out of T2. That's right out of Stopping at the Gas Station, and the Terminator and John are watching these two kids, and he goes, "We're not going to make it, are we?" And there was something about having little callbacks like that like that's not a fuck yeah moment. That's not there's nothing about that other than just, there's something ubiquitous to what human beings do, and the fact that playing violence is everywhere, and that moment I found to be a powerful moment when I saw it as a kid and when I look at it as an adult, and just kind of going, yeah, there is a kind of sympathetic frequency that the show should have with the movies where you want it to feel like Terminator. You don't want it to just feel like we called it Terminator and then did whatever we wanted.
No, you really handle it well. I'm glad you mentioned the horror element too, because that really is palpable through the show. And the music too. Like I feel Terminator, the music can kind of be the secret weapon that not enough people talk about. Was it a fun challenge to kind of figure out what the sound of the show should be?
That was one of my favorite parts, because my dear friends Michelle Bursky and Kevin Henthorne, they did the music. They also did the music for my feature film Mother Android, and I've known them for 15 years. Like they're some of my oldest friends and oldest collaborators, and so for us it kind of felt like being back in film school and just kind of low stakes, having fun, and just going, okay, like what, sometimes we would forget that it was Terminator and just kind of vibe off of things. And Kevin and Michelle and I have a process that is pretty unique and pretty crazy. And one of the things that starts is that, they just write a bunch of music kind of at random. They have no idea what I'm doing. It's before they've been brought on. It's literally, Michelle heard that I was doing Terminator. And then 3 days later, they sent me an email with like 15 songs. And then I wrote to them. And some of the songs like weren't quite right. And then other songs, that there's this kind of boom, 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 that like that, you know exactly what it is. So that was one of the first things that they sent me. And I was like, oh, that's kind of the theme. That's kind of our theme for the show, because we knew we wanted to do, the heavy metal hammer hits and the like that stuff had to kind of be in there at some point, but we didn't want to just, play what it was in the 80s. And so finding its own unique footprint, super fun, super creative, and I think that they killed it.
Yeah, is that a little atypical to have the music ahead of time and be able to write towards that?
Yeah, it usually doesn't happen, and it's it's just because we're friends, and the things that they sent me, it's not like we just slotted those into the finished show, but those were kind of the things that were the jumping off points for us. When they sent me probably 40 minutes of music, whereas the whole show is hours and hours.
Right. You've also just like handled adaptations of things like Memetic and like Mega Man, and it feels like all of those are kind of analogous to Terminator in some ways, of just these future dystopia kind of things. Has it been fun to kind of take these established properties and get to reimagine them through different mediums and just explore different sides of them like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the challenge of just kind of figuring out when it's a property that people know and love, of going, what do people love about this? What is the thing that if you take it out, it's broken, and then they're going to go, that I don't recognize it anymore. And then how do you distill those things, protect them, but then also figure out to say something new and say something, because it is kind of funny. Audiences, they always want something new, but they also want something familiar. And so just the seesaw of that, it's just really tricky. And I think that at least with Terminator, because that's the one that has gotten made and the one that is coming out, I feel for me, we'll see what audiences think when it comes out, but I feel like I was able to walk a line here of really pushing us into new territory. But when that happens, I think that it feels very earned. And for me, just kind of making sure that we never break it. Like we never go to a place of, I don't recognize you might as well have just given this some other title and done your own thing.
Being involved in an anime, like what is kind of your broader history with anime? Are there shows that are kind of your standout shows?
Obviously, Ghost in the Shell and Akira. Like, I'm an American, and so those are kind
Sure,
of the first two that you get when you're kind of going into it. But also, it would be dishonest of me, being a child of the '90s, to not say that Pokemon was huge and like was super, super into it back in the day. The thing that kind of became the gateway for me was the Animatrix. The Matrix is my favorite movie of all time. It for me is kind of the North Star that kind of helps me orient what am I doing with my career and sometimes my life. When those Animatrix pieces came out, it just really kind of sent me on a path to go and search out more and other stuff. So I mean, the other one that's just kind of a favorite of mine is Samurai Champloo. Like it's so sick.
Yeah, and just how that show uses music too.
Yeah.
Like it's such a fun time.
Yeah.
Animatrix is such a good example of taking something that like Western audiences are familiar with and just not redoing it, but just building out that world. Like it's such a fun approach to
I have to say, on some kind of record here, I think that it's just like a cultural failing on our part that there are not now 300 episodes for the Animatrix. Yeah. I actually don't understand it. I work in this industry and I'm like, can somebody explain to me what this could have just gone on forever? It should still be going. What's going on? I think that there's something about the anime way in, because it just forces you to introduce new elements, because anime is a certain thing. And if you don't do certain things that make it feel like anime, then what are you doing? And so in the same way that, doing a Star Wars anime kind of forces them to curve left, and then suddenly they're doing things that they wouldn't or couldn't necessarily do in the live action movies. Absolutely the same thing here with Terminator, where it's just kind of like, oh, okay, this is a different mode. Like we're not doing a 2-hour, $200 million action movie here. We're doing an anime. And so that just kind of means that the variables that are in the equation are different. And so what's on the other side of the equal sign, it's going to be different than what's coming out lately.
With something like Terminator, it's such a smart way if someone hasn't seen any anime before. If they like Terminator, they watch Terminator Zero, then they maybe watch Ghost in the Shell next. Like
I
the
hope so.
idea
I hope
of
so.
doing that kind of thing is such a beautiful just connection, and it's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, my hope is really, hopefully somebody will tweet me this at some point, but my hope is that there's some 12-year-old who hops on Netflix in August and this is their entry into Terminator. They haven't seen any of the others, and like they watch this first, and then off of this they go and get their minds blown by watching the movies. Like that to me, just knowing that there will probably be some human being on the planet that experiences it that way, I think that that's super rad.
I mean, to even bring it full circle and have some little 12-year-old watch the show and have to turn it off because
Sure.
they're too
Yeah.
scared by something. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyways, though, thank you so much, Mattson.
This
It's
was
a
rad.
great show. I love what you're doing with it, and yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for hanging.
Wasn't that cool? I mean, I think a lot of people say Terminator can't survive without James Cameron, but I think this is proof that it can. Like, Matson Tomlin really cares about this franchise. He wants to do exciting things with it, and he's really interested in just getting the most out of Terminator, and it's clear that he cares a lot about it. So it should be really exciting to see what he can do with Terminator's future, and also just what he's going to continue to do as a storyteller. I've kind of laid out a lot of ingredients for why Terminator Zero is set to succeed, whether that's Terminator as a brand, production IG, Mattson Tomlin, but the final ingredient on why this show I think is going to work so well is Netflix themselves. Netflix has really become a leading name in the anime industry. A lot of streaming services want to do things with anime, they're trying to capitalize on anime, but they don't exactly know the right approach. And Netflix has really become an interesting player in terms of producing original series, but also just their acquisitions and distribution. Like, Netflix is the only place where you can watch the anime Monster. Monster's not like a new show by any means, but the fact that it is available to watch there shows that these people are real anime geeks that care about stuff. The fact that they're going back and cherry picking old properties and making sure that you can watch them in addition to their new shows is really special and shows where Netflix falls with anime. They really are taking it seriously, and that's just genuinely exciting. Like, some of the new original anime that Netflix has had a hand in producing are shows like Spriggan, Devilman Crybaby, Pluto, High Rise Invasion. They're the home for the upcoming Ranma 1/2 anime and Dan to Dan. These are really exciting properties that are totally different and kind of highlight the versatility of anime and how it can appeal to audiences of all kinds. And in addition to Netflix helping pioneer original programs, they've also really done an interesting job of taking established IP and turning them into anime, just like they've done with Terminator Zero, like Castlevania, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, Arcane. There's an upcoming Devil May Cry anime that's coming out too. All of these are existing franchises that have been reinvented as anime, and Terminator Zero feels like a really exciting stepping stone in that process, where if Terminator Zero can do this and succeed, there's really no telling what else can become the next IP that Netflix helps give an anime makeover. Like, you could do a RoboCop anime, something like a Mad Max anime. I mean, you could just stick to James Cameron. You could do like an Alien anime, an Avatar anime, an Abyss. And like, an Abyss anime would just be so cool and something that no one would expect but makes perfect sense. Like, even True Lies. True Lies is like a great action film that they were trying to make a sequel to for years but could just never get off the ground. It might sound silly to do True Lies as an anime, but why not? Like, if Terminator Zero kind of proves that you can tell these adult stories, that anime isn't something that's strictly for kids, that it doesn't need to be denigrated that way, that it's something that's for adults telling mature stories. And I mean, while we're talking about Schwarzenegger, Last Action Hero is kind of a reverse isekai series when you think about it, and it would be so cool to do a Last Action Hero anime that takes Jack Slater and Danny and like sends them into 1990s anime action movies, whether that's like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Ninja Scroll, or takes characters from those movies and puts them in the real world. Like, that's what you need to be doing, to find properties that work together with the medium of anime and can tell a story that complements the original, but also helps push it into really exciting new territory. Like, Last Action Hero really makes sense with anime. It really works together. And I think Terminator Zero is opening exciting doors there. Hopefully we'll see more James Cameron properties receive that treatment. And there's really just no telling what is going to happen next, where Netflix is going with these ideas. And it's just a really exciting time, not just for the Terminator franchise, but for anime in general. Now, before we go, we are gonna do another installment of the Big Three, our classic installment, Big Three. For those of you that don't know, Big Three is where we highlight 3 miscellaneous anime properties that deserve your attention. There's so much anime out there. It's easy for shows to slip through the cracks. You can't watch everything. So this is our way of kind of just highlighting 3 things that are worth your time. And because we're talking about Terminator Zero so much, we're gonna do a special Killer Android edition of the Big Three. The first show we're talking about is Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell, a no-brainer here. Ghost in the Shell is kind of the archetypal science fiction cyberpunk anime. Production IG made this movie. Production IG is doing Terminator Zero, so it makes sense to pair these things together. Ghost in the Shell, for those of you who aren't familiar with its basic premise, it's about Major Motoko Kusanagi, who is a cyborg police officer who becomes involved in this case about an evil hacker named the Puppet Master, who is hacking into other cyborgs and giving them new identities that can cause them to rebel, kill people, and kind of just go outside the lines that they're typically allowed to. And investigating this case causes the Major to really think about who she is, the life she's led, if having a different identity would change the track she's been on in life. It really gets into like interesting questions of identity, sense of self, what it means to be human, really like Philip K. Dick themes, but also themes that are very much present in Terminator. It's such a good story. Mamoru Oshii directed it, who's really a great anime storyteller. If you like Ghost in the Shell, there's a sequel to it, but also all sorts of anime series expansions. There's a whole connected universe that is just like one of the more entertaining sci-fi anime universes out there. Many of these series you can watch on Netflix too. So after you watch Terminator Zero, just turn on Ghost in the Shell and have fun with that.
Humanity has underestimated the consequences of computerization.
Nonsense! This babble offers no proof at all that you're a living, thinking life form.
And can you offer me proof of your existence? How can you, when neither modern science nor philosophy can explain what life is?
The next thing we'd like to highlight is Inuyashiki. This one is a little more obscure. It's 11-episode anime by the creator of Gantz, which is another dark science fiction like death game series that is really cool. Inuyashiki, it's about a 58-year-old man and a teenager who both experience the same mysterious incident, which leaves them transformed into powerful cyborgs. And what happens here is the teenager uses this new power to go on a killing spree, to cause terrorism, and really just abuse the power that he's had. Meanwhile, the 58-year-old man, who is neglected by his family, kind of feels invisible to society, he is able to use his new powers to stop this teenager. He's in a very unique position to do something good here and be a hero. And Inuyashiki, it's such an interesting deconstruction of superheroes, power, corruption, and just the different ways that people can use the same power in different ways. It's one of my favorite anime of like the past decade. It doesn't overextend its welcome. Like I said, it's only 11 episodes, so you can really binge through this easily. And it's just a gorgeous series that isn't afraid to go to dark places. Many of those too feel aligned with Terminator Zero and what it's saying about artificial intelligence. So Inuyashiki.
犯人いるぞバンバンだ
Finally, want to talk about a OVA that is called Black Magic M66. This is a 47-minute OVA from 1987 that is really obscure. I didn't find out about Black Magic M66 until a few years ago, but I really, really love it, and it kind of feels like this fascinating counterpoint to Terminator. It's about a freelance reporter who stumbles upon this botched military mission where cargo gets left in the wilderness, and the cargo are these two killer androids that suddenly get activated, and they're trying to track down their inventor's daughter and exterminate her. So you have the military trying to find these androids to take them out. You have the freelance reporter who's trying to find the daughter and protect her. You get this really engaging cat and mouse story that accomplishes so much in only 47 minutes. Like I said, it's under an hour long, but you get a real sense of character development. There's great suspense going on here. It has that really beautiful 80s hand-drawn animation that is just beautiful to look at, and it's just such a fascinating counterpoint to Terminator Zero. You should watch Terminator Zero, then put on Black Magic M66, and just see how far killer android anime have come in 40 years. They're dealing with the same idea, but approaching them totally differently, and I just think that's really cool. It's co-directed by Masamune Shirow, who did the Ghost in the Shell manga, and Hiroyuki Kitakubo, who did Blood the Last Vampire and Ryujin Z. Both of these are, again, very prolific anime storytellers. They pour their heart and soul into this anime, and it's just a really fascinating counterpoint, I think. So once again, for Big 3 Killer Android Edition, we have Ghost in the Shell, Inuyashiki, and Black Magic M66.
何してんの早く
Fortunately, fellow otaku, that's all the time we have in this episode before I get isekai'd back to reality. We would once again like to thank Netflix. We want to thank Matson Tomlin for taking the time to talk to us. And we'd like to thank you for going on this adventure with us and just being fans in general, guys. So, once again, fellow otaku, see you later, Space Cowboys, and I'll be back. Space Cowboys.